So we have something called the 3 questions of economics. They are what to produce, how to produce it, and for whom do you produce? And the big questions, these big questions are different between a market system, what you would call capitalist system, and a socialist system, right? In a market system, these 3 questions are, you say what to produce. Well, you could look around, see what does the economy need, and how do we know what it needs? Something called, and this is really the most important, probably the most important part of a market is prices. You can watch some videos on that, but prices give you information on relative supply and demand. What is needed in the economy and what is it missing? If you have something, I would give an example of, think of you're in college, so you're hoping to get a degree and go into a career field of some sort. What career field do you go into? How do you know? Well, there's 2 things. What do I like? And also you should consider what is going to pay me, right? Well, the pay to a position is determined by how that position basically benefits society. What does society want? Society likes doctors, and for some reason it likes lawyers, right? They get high pay. Now, they get a lot of pay because they benefit society in various ways. Right now, a lot of people go into nursing because you have relatively low supply, high demand, right? And because of that, you can make some serious money. My brother and his wife are nurses, and it's relatively easy to get a job compared to a lot of other fields to get a full-time position. And holy crap, they make a lot of money sometimes, right? Depending on where you are. So what do prices know that you don't? Watch those videos. In a socialist system, these are determined by the central planner. Because after all, in a socialist, you have something called factors of production. And these are land. This includes trees, minerals in the land, all of that. Labor. Generally, when we talk about labor, we're talking about unskilled labor. You have skilled labor, or human capital is intelligence. You go to college, you get trained in various fields, you learn things, you are skilled labor. This is generally unskilled labor. And then you have capital, right? Or I'm going to spell it with a K because that's the abbreviation for it, the symbol. But we have capital. Capital is not money, because generally we think of it as money, but capital is actually equipment, trucks, things, manufacturing plant, things like that, okay? And then you have entrepreneurship. It's a super long word, I'm not going to spell it there. But entrepreneurship, those are people that have some kind of knowledge of how to run a business, and they go out and they risk what they have to go start a business. We have returns. Return to land is rent. Labor gets a return called a wage. Capital gets a return called interest. And entrepreneurial, what is the return to an entrepreneur? Profit. Now, remember I said that people only act if motivated to act. Your land, we have ownership of private ownership of land. If I have this land and I could use it myself, but I'm going to give up that use, that's the opportunity cost, and I'm going to give it to somebody else to use, I need something in return, rent. If you're going to make me work, you're going to have me come and labor, toil, you darn well better pay me to do it, right? Wage, nobody works for free. Capital, if I'm going to give you my car or my truck, I expect some kind of interest, right? That you would provide me with. This includes, you could say money, but generally, if I'm going to loan out money, I'm going to get an interest rate. And entrepreneur, if I'm going to go out and start a business and risk everything I have, I need to make a profit. Business, they only exist to make profit, right? And that's good. It's a good thing. If a business doesn't make a profit, it goes out of business. It collapses. Right? And everybody that worked for that business gets laid off. They lose their job. Right? Their land is transferred to somebody else, yada, yada. So, what to produce? Well, prices will tell you how to produce it. Prices also tell you how to produce things. Should I use more land, more labor, more capital? What? How do I build a house? What should I build a house out of? Well, it depends on what I need to do the house to do. Is it just to live in, right? Then I probably want it to look nice. But you could build it out of plastic, wood, steel, concrete, all these different things. Well, I should look at the relative prices of those different objects, various imperfect substitutes. I can substitute one for the other, but I need to look at the prices and the return I would get in terms of satisfaction and decide what to build my house out of. Generally, people do it out of wood because it's relatively cheap and it's a very good building material. What's the downside? Well, we have house fires, right? Wood burns much more easily than concrete or steel. Plastic, could you build a house from plastic? Maybe. I bet you could, some kind of plastic. What do they have? Kind of like insulated plastic. What am I thinking of? But you could, anyways. They have something that you could do. So you could build steel. People build houses out of steel. What they do is they take a shipping container and they remodel it. Use a lot of plastic in the inside with insulation. And for whom? Well, the market determines who wants it. And again, if you are a highly valuable individual to society, a doctor, say, society gives you a lot of money. You can take that money and you can buy a lot of things with it, right? So that is, if you provide a valuable service to society, society will reward you by providing you with a lot of stuff, okay? So for background on some of this, you can go watch the video that I did post. Things I didn't talk about yet: specialization. Specialization comes from trade, right? If you're just all by yourself and you don't want to talk to anybody, you could be like that guy that moved to Alaska for 27 years and he lived on his own. Now, even he had to get stuff sent in. He had to get bullets and get his firearms fixed and stuff like that. So and fishing poles and things like that. He had to get sent in. He would get a shipment by plane every once in a while. So, but he lived up in Alaska for 27 years all by himself. He didn't like people, apparently, and he filmed it. But in a society, now he had to do everything on his own, right? He had to catch the fish, he had to clean it, he had to dry it, he had to cook it, and he had to eat it, which is terrible. Oh, he had to eat, no. But, I do like fish, so I would like to catch fish and eat it. But I don't want to clean it. I would rather have someone else clean it for me. So probably have someone else catch it for me too. But I prefer to do other things. I certainly don't want to fix my car. There's things I can do in the car, but that's one thing I've always hated, is getting all greasy. And my dad's a mechanic, and his hands are black from 40, 50, probably 50 years of working on a car. So what we do is we trade. We specialize in one thing. In my case, I've been able to specialize in economic ideas and teaching, and hopefully I've honed my craft to a decent level. And what I do is I do that. I get something called money, which is a medium of exchange. We'll go into that later. And I am able to trade that. So basically what I'm doing is I teach for a certain period of time. I take that time and I exchange it for goods and services, right? I provide something beneficial to society, hopefully, and society provides me with benefits back. And because of trade, I don't have to do everything myself. Subjective value. So that's another video. I'll just point you to that video. It's really good. I love that video. Okay, so again, I kind of went over a lot of stuff in the previous video, which I'm still waiting for it to upload, and it's going to send me an email when it's done, so I'll put that up there though. But here I have, let me get into supply and demand. Okay, just a little bit. Concepts. One, we have money versus relative money, prices. Sorry, money prices versus relative prices. The law of demand. Also in micro, you're going to get into what's called elasticity. We have the law of supply, substitution, and complements. We have something called equilibrium. We have markets. I don't know if I'll go in exact order here, but we have normal and inferior goods. Okay, so I'll just go there. Number one, money prices versus relative prices. If the price of a jacket is $500, then you say, wow, that's pretty expensive. Well, it depends, right? How much is the price of a pencil? Maybe that's $50. Oh, well, actually, the relative price of a jacket, not so bad, right? So, money versus relative prices. And what we would generally look at more closely is relative prices. So think of the price of a good compared to what it takes you to buy that good, your wage, right? So that's how you would probably look at it. Is something expensive? Is it cheap? Well, what is it relative to what I get paid, right? Law of demand. This says that as we get a change in price, that will cause, and this is quantity demand actually, but change in the quantity demand. That causes a change in the quantity demand for a good, opposite change. That is, if the price goes up, the quantity demand goes down. And vice versa, right? So that leads to a downward sloping demand curve. So here we have price, here we have quantity. And quantity is a function of price. Now, if you think back in math, you can see that. Think back to math. Generally, this is a function of this. In economics, for some reason they switched it. This is a function of this. Either way, its demand is downward sloping. And the law of supply is the exact opposite. That says if the price goes up, you are more willing to supply good. Think of labor. So let's say I give you a raise. Are you more or less likely to come to work? Probably more likely, right? If I say that the price of your hamburgers that you like has gone up by $1, are you more or less likely to buy it? You're probably going to think about it. Maybe you buy one less hamburger per year or something. Either way, that says that your demand has decreased. Substitutions, these are, so if that price of the hamburger goes up, you probably consume less hamburger and more burritos or more something else. That is, you're substituting one good for the other. A good of labor and capital are substitutes in a certain way that you can. If I am looking to produce something and I'm trying to figure out how to produce it, then one thing I will probably look at is what are the relative prices of labor, I keep saying land, but labor and capital, and what is the relative output. So if the price of labor goes up, I'm McDonald's, I institute more capital, such as touchscreens, right? We're seeing that happen. Price of labor is going up artificially through minimum wage laws. So what we do is we say, you know what? Price of labor is relatively expensive to capital. And so in order to fix that, we're going to use more capital, less labor. Complements, well, generally, labor and capital are complementary. You know, you can't have a truck without a human driving it yet. And if you have a human, most production, whether it's McDonald's or anything else, you can't really do very much without capital equipment, right? And capital equipment doesn't work very well without humans. I can have a touch screen and I can replace a human with a touch screen, but generally before that I have the capital, the cash register, and I have a human pounding on it. Okay? I have a capital equipment in the back, the fryer, things like that, but I need a human to stand there and work the fryer, to work the grill. Now they're working on capital that will do the grill all by itself, but you're still gonna have to have somebody to go and pick up the hamburgers and put them in buns, do all that stuff, right? They have capital that they're working on getting to do that, but it's not there yet, and it probably never will be there, because there are certain things machines cannot do. They can't fold laundry. It takes them like a day to fold a shirt. So generally, people and capital are complements. Costco has forklifts, but it has a lot of people. People drive the forklifts. Couldn't have a Costco without capital. No forklifts, no Costco, right? Because I mean, how are you going to get those massive boxes off the top shelf? Equilibrium. So when we have this supply and demand model, supply and demand kind of bounce off each other as the price changes given changes in supply and demand, and eventually you get what's called an equilibrium. And what that is this demand curve represents individuals and what they're willing to pay for some product. So we'll think of coffee. And here you have a bunch of suppliers that are willing to supply coffee at different prices. So this person is willing to supply coffee at this very low price. So let's think of roasted raw coffee. I think it's the equilibrium's like $3 a pound, $2 maybe. Let's say this guy, he's willing to supply it at $2. This guy's not willing to supply it for less than $4. What's the difference? Well, probably their efficiency and their ability to grow it. They might be in different regions, right? Think about supplying coffee in Hawaii. Why is Kona coffee so expensive? It's very difficult and expensive to produce coffee in Hawaii versus Honduras or something where it's very cheap, right? So if the equilibrium price is $3, the person in Hawaii is not going to be able to supply it. Person in Honduras, though, he's perfectly willing to supply it, and you're going to have this at a given. In here, you have different companies that are willing to pay. You know, Folgers, it's crummy coffee, right? Come on, there's no argument there. So Folgers, maybe they're willing to pay $2 a pound, and Starbucks is willing to pay $4 a pound. So Starbucks can actually buy that Kona if they want, but generally what happens is you have a market price of coffee by the supply and demand, and that is the price at which the number of people willing to buy the coffee at that price is the same as the number of people willing to supply the coffee at that price. And it's called the market clearing price, MCP. And we'll call it Q star, P star, right? Okay? And what markets do is they bring these demanders and suppliers together into something that says, hey, this is the given price that the market is willing to bear for this product. Right? And a market would be like a marketplace, you know, Ken's Marketplace in Seattle, or Quality Food Centers, or Fred Meyer, or something like that. These are all markets. What they are is they bring suppliers, the General Mills, the Silk Company, the almond milk, the cashew milk, the milk, the yogurt, the Fage, all these different things. They bring them together in one place, and all the customers come together to that one place. Actually, what's called middlemen, which is valuable service middlemen provide, because it's very difficult. I definitely wouldn't want to go to the suppliers of all these companies separately and try to buy stuff. It's really easy to go to a centralized market where all these suppliers bring their stuff, and all the demanders can go and try to buy that stuff, right? So markets are the economy. The economy is one giant marketplace, basically, right? Normal and inferior goods. a normal good is like coffee, right? It's a good where as your income goes up, you buy more of it. An inferior good would be probably like Folgers or the really cheap coffee that you're broke, so you don't want to pay much for coffee, and so you buy the crummy coffee, the cheap stuff. But once you start to earn more money, you buy less of that. So for most normal goods, as your income goes up, you demand more of it. With inferior goods, as your income goes up, you buy less of it. Hot dogs, beans and rice, rice and beans, right? Generally, as far as a staple meal product, Top Ramen, things like that. But with a normal good would be like a more expensive coffee. Maybe you start buying Green Mountain coffee or Starbucks or SBC or whatever, right? But you're probably going to buy less of that bottom shelf coffee. Malt-O-Meal cereal, you buy less of that and you start buying more actual Frosted Flakes or whatever it is, right? The relatively more expensive products. I grew up on Malt-O-Meal, so I don't know. I don't think there's any difference really, not much. So if you want to save money, you can continue to buy it, but generally people like brands. Maybe there is a little bit of a flavor difference, I'm sure. So okay, so I have a lot of videos. I won't go too much into it, but supply and demand applications. When you get into things like rent control, which is a floor, an artificial floor, that says you cannot sell this, rent control is minimum wage is an artificial floor. Minimum wage, you cannot buy for less than this. Not a problem if it's down here, but what if it's up here? Minimum wage. What you're doing is this is the equilibrium, the market clearing price. And you're saying, nope, that's not good, you have to pay more. And so you have all these people that they demand less good, less employees. And here you have more people out on the market supplying their labor, and so you get what's called a surplus of labor, right? And that's because the price is too high and you need to allow it to fall. So let's say there's some videos on that. And also let me jump to rent control. Seattle is talking a lot about, they already instituted a price control on wages. Now they want to institute a price control on rent, even though it's constitutionally illegal. But they want to do it anyways. So they're saying rent control, you cannot rent for more than this price. Now what that does is in New York, it's been disastrous. Nobody builds new apartments, because why would you? You're a fool if you build a new apartment. You will never recoup your money because you can never raise the rent to the market price. It's fixed at, it's called rent stabilization, but it's fixed at maybe 1% per year, and maybe your costs go up 3% per year. And so eventually you get slumlords because they can't afford to keep up with it. I know a guy in New York, he lives in a 3-bedroom apartment with, I think, 9 family members. Now think about the water is included, the heat is included. They had some more people come and visit. They're from Haiti, and they had more people come and visit, and the landlord had to ask, please, would you give us a few more dollars for your rent, because I'm losing money on your apartment. Your water bill alone is costing me a fortune, plus taxes and all the other things. And so eventually you get to the point where owners of the building can no longer afford to keep it up, right? And they tend to walk away from their investment, and then you just have buildings crumble. And the reason is here, and it's bad for tenants, because if it becomes rent control, then I would rather have a condo. I'll just sell the building outright, and they tear it down and they build condos, which means less supply, but at a lower price, and you have more people wanting to rent. And so you have this massive shortage. And you don't see building in places in Boston where they used to have rent control. They stopped. There was no building in Boston, no new units until they ended rent control, and then they started building there again. New York, yeah, you've got $1 million listings. They're all condos, people buying the product outright. But they're not building new apartment buildings. They're building new apartments in Seattle because rent control is illegal. If they institute rent control in Seattle, I guarantee the number of apartments would drastically collapse. The number of new apartments, and you would have a massive housing shortage. And now what you get when you get these price controls, you get something called a black market. Right? In black markets, these are where transactions are illegal. And think of some examples of a black market. The obvious would be 5 years ago, say, marijuana, right? Marijuana is an illegal drug. Just, I think 2 years ago, they legalized it in Washington. And what that is, you still have a black market. You still have people out on the corner selling it illegally. But what it did is, by legalizing the product, you bring a lot of that out into the open. And the big problem with black markets is, well, it is itself a crime, right? And if it's a crime, you have no legal protection. No legal protection means somebody rips you off, can't call the cops. People do. You know, this guy sold me bad marijuana. Can you send the police? Like, yeah, we'll send the police. Yeah, we'll be right there. But they get on the world's dumbest criminals, right? Videos. So what you get instead is you get a lot of violence. So you have a lot of crime, a lot of murders. You have mafia style, you have gangs. They get into these businesses because they're very profitable, but an upstanding citizen is not going to generally get into, I guess, Walter White, right? I never really watched that show, but I've heard it was very good. I'm sure most of you have probably seen it. But, you know, he's a criminal, right? And you see a lot of violence going on in that black market. So the kind of people that will get involved, they're generally untrustworthy. A lot of violence, no regulations, no trust or retribution, no legal system, right? And I point out there's a great marijuana commercial. Just look up on YouTube, first marijuana commercial, right? And it's got a guy walking around, sushi, I got some sushi. Hey man, I got the greatest California rolls. I got the, you know, whatever else I have. And then it says, you wouldn't buy your sushi from this guy. Why would you buy your marijuana from him? No, come to a legal establishment in which you can always come back and complain. And if we sell you a bad product, we back it up. The guy in the corner, he sells you whatever he's got, and then he might not ever see you again. He doesn't care, right? You overdose and die. The marijuana shop that relies on a quality product, they sell you a bad product and you die, they're in trouble. The guy on the corner sells you a bad product, never trace back to him. Nobody knows who he is. So, you know, another great example of black markets is the organs. Right? What's the legal price of a human organ? 0. You're not allowed to sell your organs. And so what that leads to is you can go online, you can find black markets for human organs. And in India, in fact, there's one province where you can give an organ to a non-family member, I think. And what they do is they make up fake documents, a lot of corruption, criminal behavior there, and they make fake documents, and that say, hey, I actually am a distant relative, and they go to Nepal and they get very, very, very poor people, and they say, hey, give us a kidney, because you have 2, right? You're hoarding one. And they say, give us a kidney and we'll give you so much money. And what always ends up happening is that there's gangs and criminal enterprises that engage in this behavior, and the person that gives the kidney is generally left vastly worse off after they sell their kidney than before. And so you get a lot of problems associated with that, right? So hope you enjoyed this, and I was disappointed with last night's game, but you know, Alabama Tunga Tunga Bailoba, I think. Great job. Fantastic guy. Like a stand-up kid. So, next year, go Cougs. And take care. Have fun. Hope you enjoy this.